Welcome, welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast, and as always, good people, I am in. This thing isn't even on. Airplane mode. Oh my
Just go to
goodness.
sleep.
And now a man who used an evangelical who needs no introduction.
Hey, Pocket Locker. How you doing today?
I'm all right. How are
Good.
you doing today?
I'm okay. And now
You're in
a
full girl
baby
dad mode.
who was a baby who was so quiet 10 minutes ago that you wouldn't even know she was in the room. A baby who's gonna cry now.
Yeah, that's
My
over.
my one little friend. I don't know if you can see her. Is she cut off? Do you
Oh, you
see
can
her?
see her. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, her mom is on the way down here, and I think she needs to get fed because she's not happy with me. So why don't you tell her today's title, Pocket Locker? She'll be thrilled.
I was like, I don't know if this is a child friendly show.
She doesn't profess a religion at this.
Have Christianity and Islam saved black people?
Have Christianity and Islam saved black people? Do you have an opinion on this, my little friend?
that's how that's how Yahweh makes me feel too.
It's so Pocket Locker says that's how Yahweh makes him feel too.
You scream in terror, get me out of
Exactly.
here. Where's my
I'm I'm
mom?
gonna I'm gonna see if
I
my
want
wife's
some
on the way.
food.
I'm
Look, y'all,
gonna I'm
this
gonna
is
excuse myself, Pocket. I can still hear
all
you.
right,
I'm
you're
gonna mute
good.
myself.
This is the proper response when you're in church. Remember when they first tried to take you to church and you would just scream and cry and kick and try to get out of there? That was when you had your full energy. That was when you were at your best. that was peak you fighting for freedom. And then over time they wore your ass down. Not only did you stop resisting, you started getting out of bed on Sunday morning yourself. You started dressing yourself for church, putting your little suit on, your little dress on, started carrying a little Bible with your name in it. Look at what they did to us. Kicking and screaming, y'all. That's how you should have been up in there. Kicking and screaming. What's up, Carrie Ann Chrysler? Good to see you, Carrie Ann. Kicking and screaming, y'all. Next time somebody drag me to church and they bring a baby and they're kicking and screaming, whoever dragged me in there, I'm gonna turn them and be like, "That's me." Y'all, we got a good one lined up for y'all today. I wanted to rant about religion. But surprise, surprise. But I think the video that we have actually will give people. I think it's going to be informative. I think the video touches really on a lot of things I've been trying to talk about, like trying to really get at like what is the difference between like what's going on in black religion. You see what I'm saying? Like we know black people are really religious, but we have a audience that's probably predominantly not black. So let's get into like culturally, like what's really going on, what are the differences, and then I can shit all over that. My opinion is honestly like just off rip, it, it is I'm gonna let people make the argument about the significance of the religion to people culturally and socially. all I'm gonna just tell y'all is y'all understand that that doesn't change the truth value of it. So that's, to me, that's the challenge. That's what we got to deal with. All right, my one black friend is back from parenting responsibilities.
Yes,
So
endless.
all right, well, let's get started while we got you here. All right.
Historically, houses of worship for the black community, I believe, is what has allowed us to keep our sanity as a people.
Religion in the United States has been used throughout history not only as the bedrock of the persecution of Black Americans, but also as the bedrock of their emancipation.
They made meaning of Christian teaching about salvation, of biblical traditions regarding liberation.
Hey guys, I'm Sana, and today I'm going to explore the role of religion, especially Christianity and Islam, in the Black American history of liberation. And I want to ask if religion still has a role to play today in the fight against systematic racism.
All right, this music, I feel like this music
European
is
colonizers
definitely
justified
getting,
slavery through the Bible.
demonetized.
There was this idea that biblically, through the story of Noah's curse, Africans were meant to be slaves. But black slaves also went on to adopt Christianity and make it into a faith for survival and mobilization.
All right, and we're done, right? And that's the problem. That's the first thing, right? This whole thing right here, y'all. See, it probably happened so fast you missed it.
Through the story of Noah's curse, Africans were meant to be slaves. But black slaves also went on to adopt Christianity and make it into a faith
Wait, hang
for
on.
slavery.
I want to. You want to come at it right away?
European colonizers justified slavery through the Bible.
European colonizers justified slavery through the Bible.
Yeah.
See, that's the part we just blow right through that. We blow right through that part because we want to talk about how much black people love them some Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fruit of a poisonous tree. It's fruit of a poisonous tree. Like, and you're always, this is gonna be the theme for today, at least for me. You can have black people found it and they remixed it and they jazzed it up and they put some jambalaya in it and it was beautiful and all of that. But we always gonna have to start with European colonizers used this to enslave them. And that's gonna be the context of all of this. So that's where we're starting from, y'all.
There was this idea that biblically, through the story of Noah's curse, Africans were meant to be slaves. But black slaves also went on to adopt Christianity and make it into a faith for survival and mobilization. What we know as the black church today formed through what happened during slavery and the period after it. Now, slaveholders...
Yeah, so this is what's super interesting, right? Is she's actually now going to get into like how it got introduced to them and why they end up adopting it to begin with. But I don't want us to like rush through. Well, one, we got to pause it because we got to make sure we don't get, I'm trying not to get taken down. But also like, I think she's doing a good job, and I think she tries to be respectful, and she's trying to keep the video short, right? But there's like a weightiness to me that all this needs to have into it. We're talking about enslaved people who were forcefully transported across the ocean. They're now enslaved, deprived of their freedom. Okay, and then from then, amongst their colonizers, there's a back and forth, and then a movement towards a Christianity, independent of them, really has nothing to do with them. Okay, and then that shifts the attitudes of white folks, to put it simply, about whether or not they should even introduce Christianity to black people. And then when they do, they give us like the fucked up version. So
well, they give us the useful version, that they want to have, that is designed to keep black people in line. I would argue it goes a bit further than that. Unknowingly, it keeps many people, regardless of their color, in line. There's a fear some Christians have of an atheist coming to power in this country and saying, well, now there's not going to be any more religion. We're going to outlaw religion. I don't know any atheist that would do that when we see how useful religion is for ordering people, right? Getting them to rally around something we actually need to do to preserve our, our republic here, or to get them to sort of, I'd say, be appeased. Like look, you can go ahead and you can say Merry Christmas, but Fox will come out with that. Fox News will come out with that. There's a war on Christmas. No, I think you might be able to find a few hundred people who have an issue with there being a Christmas, but for the most part, you will find many people who are on board with it. We get to celebrate, gather together, have some time off work, maybe buy gifts, receive gifts. It's freaking fun. It's December's Halloween. It's fun. So I think that needs to be understood, because, and the sad thing about it is Christians don't read their Bibles in large numbers.
They don't.
It would be better if they did. I think that would make more atheists. So there, I could say that would be better. But at the same time, it's just having an understanding. Someone told me, one of my interlocutors on Facebook, like, oh, they don't go around changing the Bible. And I had to express, you have different translation. He was a King James only guy. And I explained, we have older and better manuscripts now than King James's team of researchers had when they basically took, I think, what was the Bible before then? It said forsooth a lot. I forget the name of it. But the King James is kind of a revamping of a previous Bible.
Right.
So if we have better information now, and some verses will drop out, new ones might be added because they're in the older manuscripts. And maybe we find them 20, 30 times. Whereas in the previous ones from the King James, they didn't have them at all. You'll see it on Instagram and YouTube. There's a conspiracy. The conspiracy is only to give people the best possible information that is found. That's not bad, in my opinion. I think that's actually good for them to say, that story of the woman taken in adultery, it doesn't show up to like the 3rd century. So we don't have it in any 1st century text, any 2nd century texts. It appears that somebody thought that would be a real good inclusion. So they put it in there. It's fantastic teaching, but perhaps it's not original at all.
Right. Right. All right, let's rock and roll.
Didn't really want their slaves to be exposed to Christianity. There was a fear that by exposing them to it, they'd see themselves as, well, equal to the slaveholder since they would share the same faith. So they adjusted their faith's teachings. The version of Christianity that slaveholders spread usually mandated a divinely ordained racial hierarchy, that slavery was God's will for people of African descent.
All right, so let me just pause here real quick, because I want to make my other point that people maybe have heard me say before, but it's another recurring thing on this channel, which is that Black people have always used Christianity to audition for full citizenship, and it has never worked. And I think you're going to get a lot of that in this explanation, this history, but you're hearing it already there, right? Like when they even thought about teaching Black people Christianity, they were like, hell to the no, because they'll think that they're equal to us. And then they were only willing to give us a Christianity that made it clear that we weren't. Now that's you got to really think about that for a while, y'all, because I would argue that we're still living in that. Most white congregations are still descendant of the colonial thinking and framework, and they think of what Black people practice, a reclaimed Christianity where we're equal, and Black people see themselves in they're literally, to me, not the same. they're almost like not the same religion in a sense.
That's a pretty interesting point. Obviously, there are many stripes of Christianity. I'm not going to go as far as saying there are thousands. I'm not in that camp. Maybe there's 20, 30, could be 50, 100 at best. We can go to a Pentecostal church versus an Episcopalian church where things might be very formal, and see that Jesus is felt and dealt with very differently. You can go to a Baptist church where it's jumping in there and it's just a celebration.
Yeah.
And they have a few white people maybe in the congregation that come there because they feel something, right? It's not just being, here's the gospel being spoon fed to you, but there's allow me to use a religious term, there's a spirit of connectedness there because the people are active during the sermon. They're active during the music. And so it's not, I guess, the feeling of being preached at. You are involved, you are immersed. And there's a lot of people who are looking for that, right? And we can see the videos on YouTube. There are white churches that are like, well, mostly white church. It's funny to say that term, a white church and a black church. There are churches with mostly white congregations where that same feeling is there. You know, those people are up dancing around.
That's kind of my point, though, is that so I've gone to like a lot of different types of Christian churches, and I would put all of them under the umbrellas. I wouldn't actually say that they're not Christians, but what I would say is that if you go to these different churches and you experience what you experience there, it's from top to bottom very different. And you can have a thing where, say, you go to a Baptist church different from an Episcopalian church, way different from a Catholic church, way different from an Orthodox church. But one thing that will dominate all of those experiences, especially in mainstream America, is that they're all white. And all of those experiences will be and feel very white. Believe it or not, Black people also have a lot of different denominations. I don't even know if white people are aware of this, but Black people they're also Baptist, right? Versus Pentecostal, versus Episcopalian, versus Methodist. And when white people, we see in the movies, you just see the jumping, hollering, screaming. They just think, oh, that's a Black church. And they couldn't tell you probably more than that, right? And so it does end up feeling because even a lot of those churches, they like feel very Black. And we have integrated churches and churches where they're mixed race or they're very diverse, but they feel like their own cultural thing rather than fitting into the mainstream, because the mainstream is, let's face it, it's not that integrated. And I think that's, that's unfortunate, but it really, I think it has very profound difference. The thing that gets me about it is how do they see each other? Like, that's the thing. It's like, who cares? Everybody's church is different. Your church has different music, different food, whatever. But what gets me is when you really get to the bottom of it, they don't often see each other truly as equals or as truly doing Christianity like the right way. Like, for instance, like for me, like I went to like an all-white Catholic school, but the church I went to was very like integrated and mixed, non-denominational church. But my grandparents went to like an all-Black Pentecostal church, and my dad went to like an all-Black Methodist church. So my grandparents did not have a good opinion of the Catholics that like I went to school. They didn't think that, like, first of all, they didn't really think that was a good idea to be sending me to a Catholic school, right? And they did not see that Catholicism as like a legit Christianity. Like their church, matter of fact, their church which is in Jersey City, New Jersey, is a former Catholic cathedral, and they destroyed that place. When they bought the building, they literally destroyed the place. They beheaded the statues. They ripped out the pipe organ. Like, they literally fucked up the building. They destroyed it because they saw all that as like idolatry and like bad and, you know, saint worship. And also they like ruined that stuff. Like the thing I want my grandfather to do the most before he dies is to like give that church back to the city so they can restore it. And I don't even believe in God. I just think it's
pocket locker. No. You need to talk to me about that. You have your grandfather give that church to you, and you turn it into a sports bar. We need to talk about this.
Turn that place into Turn it into a sports dispensary. But I just wanted to give people like a vivid example of when I say like they don't think you're legit, like they don't think you're legit. You see what I'm saying? Even like when I remember being in a hospital and when I was going through my stuff and wanting rosary beads, and my grandmother would not bring me rosary beads because like she, as a Christian woman, thought it was wrong for her to like go get rosary beads. So that's what I mean. Like when we say these are cultural, like these are deep divides in how people in different cultures see each other's faith, right? Like it's not just aesthetic differences. It's like, no, we think what they're doing is not, and it's vice versa. When you hear white people talk a lot about charismatic churches and the gifts of the Spirit and the speaking in tongues and the way people preach, they very much talk down the core of the Black worship experience. It's too sensuous. It's too worldly. When you get to traverse between these different camps, it's like being in different worlds. So yeah, I think they're all Christian, but they don't necessarily give each other that same inclusion.
No, it's kind of sad, but really that goes back, that division, if you will, it goes back to the Old Testament. We see it there. Like there are those who say that Christ has already come, right? You get the idea like, hey, wait a minute, this has got to be less than 100 years after Jesus walked the earth. If he did, how on earth are there these different doctrines that he's come back already and gone?
Yeah.
But they existed. It's just a fact. We see it. They existed.
Yeah, and you know, it's the same thing now because it's interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like the stolen Africans didn't have their own spiritual traditions before they were enslaved in the colonies. I'll let Dr. Judith Weisenfeld of Princeton University explain.
Enslaved Africans were not interested in converting to Christianity, for example. Enslaved peoples produced religious community on their own, maintaining connections to African traditional resources and creating new versions of those.
Their own beliefs include a variety of traditional religions in West Africa and Central Africa, but also Islam and Christianity, and they ended up practicing their faith in secret gatherings. But in the 1740s, decades before the United States even existed, a wave of religious enthusiasm among European Protestants spread across the colonies. It's known as the Great Awakening. The Christian revivals, as they were called, focused on renewed individual piety and religious devotion, and they had a more egalitarian message than the one that slaveholders espoused.
People felt free to interpret the scripture and the teachings of Christianity for themselves in ways that highlighted their humanity, their equal standing before God, and the notion that God would someday liberate them. And so we begin to see new forms of African American Christianity emerge that are focused on this experience of being born again and on a more direct access that doesn't require the oversight of white clergy.
It's out of this movement that you start to see the emergence of Black leaders. A lot of them came out of the Baptist and Methodist denominations because those denominations actually licensed black men to preach. And Weisenfeld says sometimes religion even provided tools for slave revolts. One of the most famous examples that comes much later is that of Nat Turner, a religious visionary and preacher who led a rebellion in Virginia in August of 1831. Now,
this is my Jesus. When Jesus starts being the inspiration for the slave revolt, sign me up. I'll play drums for that church. That's what I'm talking about. It's no, I really do like, on some level, to be serious, I feel bad for black believers. Like, I really do. Like, because I get something being an important part of your history and your identity, and feeling like you're a people who at times have literally felt like you had nothing. And so this was the thing that you had. But that won't make it true, right? And that's the painful, and that's actually the question of the day, right? Is the truth of it more important than its social value? My thing is, I think in a practical way, for me, it doesn't matter. And that way is, I don't think anyone would voluntarily sign up for what it is, knowing that it wasn't true. If you can, then fine. Like, if you can tell people, hey, there's a really good chance this is all just a myth that they made up a couple thousand years ago, but we think it's a really useful story, so here it goes. Fine. But I don't think you can make that choice for other people, right? That goes against, to me, it goes against, I think, the informed consent that is sort of a common ethos of modern social thinking, right? Like, it's not just sort of in a romantic or sexual context, but in research, right? You always have to get informed consent from participants, right? If you're even in sales, right? We feel really bad when people lie to us about what we're purchasing versus people who are honest about the features and limitations of what we're purchasing. So I just don't think. I think it's very paternalistic when people are making that choice for other people, and so I think that's why I say, to me, it doesn't matter practically. We're in a situation where it doesn't seem to be true, and so I can't endorse like telling people to believe it because it was useful for their ancestors, or it was really important to us in the past. Like, it just doesn't matter. What do you think?
Well, I think it is. Look, from our perspective, we've read through. Have you read the whole Bible?
I think so.
Okay.
But not recently.
Okay. All right. I've read it multiple times. The thing that is, I approach people who believe in it with compassion. Because I know to some degree that it does more for many of them than it ever did for me, as far as giving them peace. The guy that stopped beating his wife and kids when he got saved, the lady who stopped drinking, the people who came off drugs, and so on and so on and so on, right? They feel that they have been redeemed by the blood of the cross.
Yeah. So is this is this the book or the faith?
The the book sort of has all the details. The faith fills in the rest.
Okay.
As far as like what they don't know, the faith fills it in, right?
Yeah.
There was a post put up on Facebook, a Christian post that talked about reading the Bible and obeying. And I gotta be me. I said, there are some things that are now illegal for you to do that the Bible tells you to do. And I started to list just a handful of those things. You know, you can't stone people to death. You can't kill somebody for working on the Sabbath. You can't kill people who don't have the same religion as you. And, you know, there might have been like 9 things I profiled, but they are Old Testament commands. Like, you're supposed to be this horrible to other people. Fortunately, modern day Christianity, for the most part, not the Project 2025 Christianity, because they haven't read the Bible all the way through either, probably, but it's not abusive for the most part. I think most Christians are live and let live people. And if they see somebody who has a lifestyle that they don't necessarily agree with, they're still willing to, I'll let that be them. I don't need to join in. And if they meet a person like that, and you've heard me say this before, the audience has too, if they get to know somebody who fits in one of those categories and eventually respect and or love them, they have a hard time justifying that category as other being there and them treating those people that fit in those categories with any disdain. You know, there'll always be the repulsive person in any given category. But for the most part, most people in many of the categories are like wonderful. You know, you're going to enjoy yourself with them. So I approach the believer with some sympathy, knowing that it could be all they are. It could be what makes them them now. And at another time, they got to the point where they couldn't handle who they were anymore. They felt lost. And so Christianity sparked their imagination and provided a direction for them to walk in. And so for those people, to some degree, Pocket Locker, has it saved them? They think so. Same with Islam. They think so.
Oh yeah, they definitely. They definitely think so. You know, it's just. I guess a question of if they're thinking well, and if that's and to what extent that's a concern of the rest of us. For me, that's another thing too. Is a lot of my I think it's become really destructive. I think most people know that. I think most people are aware of that. I think for a lot of believers, it's like, yeah, it's really bad, but they're doing it wrong. Those are the bad representatives, you know, they're not. And for them, there's no, I guess there's, if I'm being charitable, I bet you there's no doubt in their mind that the good outweighs the bad, right? And for me, since there's no truth to it, there's no doubt the bad outweighs the good. And I think we're operating from a different calculus. So for me, it's like I just want it to go away because it's not true. And the way it interacts with social issues, I just think it's done. Yes, I think it's problematic in a lot of our current social issues. But I think if we're honest with ourselves about our social history, it's always been at the core of a lot of our problems, and it's always been on the wrong side. So I think for us that are serious about trying to make the world a better place, there comes a time where I think we just need to look religion in the face and say, hey, look, we're better off without this. But that's just me. But I do think people sincerely think it saved them, and I do think they think that even though there's a lot of bad done in the name of religion, they think the good outweighs the bad. So it's I don't know. I think maybe those are irreconcilable differences, because I don't see how those two thoughts get reconciled. But I think that's where we're at.
Let's look at what you just said. So Yeah, there are some people who are religious who act poorly and they give their religion credit for their actions. My faith motivated me to do XYZ. And I know a lot of people don't like XYZ, but whatever. My faith says that. We see protesters for various causes doing this, right? They have their signs, they're out there, they're shouting people down, blah, blah, blah. Well, one came on, one Facebook post was about abortion. Well, you can guess how I reacted. I immediately go to Numbers 5, where God is the one coming up with an abortion potion. So the Bible's not anti-abortion. The Bible talks about soldiers, Hebrew soldiers killing little kids. It's not pro-life the way people think it is, right? They have their version, which doesn't include all these things that would horrify them. But they've washed it clean. They've washed it clean. You can say they've given up some of that integrity, their own integrity, to preserve the Bible's integrity by sort of closing, turning a blind eye to those things that went on. But I think in truth versus faith versus religions that people have come up with over the centuries, it would be better if we just knew the truth, regardless of how hard it is to deal with, because eventually the hardest part of dealing with the truth, we just learn how to deal with it and we move on. At any given point, societies, let's say American society, for example, is transitioning out of one way of thinking into another, out of one way of behaving into another, right? We're all conserving more these days. We're all recycling more these days. People are buying a more fuel efficient automobile these days, typically. So since we're valuing preservation of the planet, preservation of the quality of human life, and there can be those people who say, oh, yeah, well, you can't buy a house near the ocean because sea levels are rising. And then there's a meme they make about it. Somebody else makes about it where they laugh at the idea. But there's a fact that there are places that are now underwater that weren't 40 years ago.
So
they don't want to know about that, though. They don't want to know about that. They just want to, I gotcha, struck a blow for ignorance. Okay.
Yeah, so that transition you talked about, I think we're transitioning towards a more scientific way of thinking. It hasn't completely happened in any case. Can be argued or not whether or not it will, but it certainly things move and are moving in that direction. And so I think largely the fight is over. It's just a matter of literally it's just a matter of how painful are religious people going to make this. Like, how long are they going to hold on? That's really, because it's to me, it's just obvious, right? It's obvious that it's not true. So it's not going to make a comeback, right? It's not like all of a sudden the great discoveries of the next 50 years will be based in religion, and it's gonna reawaken everybody to the it's just not gonna happen.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and then I think even in government, I think largely even what we see now with the Christian right, which feels very much like a sort of their last gasp, like they're kind of overreacting. But even that, I think, is just hastening people's distaste of religion in public life. And when you look at most of the European societies that are doing really well, it's very clear that they have an even more sophisticated sort of separation of church and state than we do. So I think on the world stage, people are growing a distaste for religion and politics. And certainly, even now with the conflict that we see in the Middle East, people are very, very hesitant to talk about it in the context of a religious struggle, because again, just because I think of the huge distaste people have for that, and how much people would not have energy to participate on either side. So I just yeah. So that's another. That's what I mean. Like, and that has to happen, right? It's like it's the same thing. Like, technically, if you think about it, there are still horse and buggy places, and there are still you can still go to a dude ranch and ride a horse around or whatever. But there just comes a time when, unfortunately, certain businesses, certain industries, they've lived their life, they've served their purpose, and now there is a new technology in town. And largely that's kind of how I think of it, is largely we've just advanced sort of in sort of the technology of our minds, of our capacity, and the very nature of how we approach understanding the world around us. And unfortunately, religious authorities have had a lot of power, money, and influence, having exclusive domain in those areas of our lives, and so they're not letting go, period. I want to say without a fight, but they're just not letting go, period. They're not letting go.
Well, someone wants to have that power, right? Somebody wants to have that power.
I'll be honest with you, I do.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, no, like that's like a big part of my thing, is like I want to take it from them, like me personally. Because then you don't deserve it. You don't deserve this influence over people. You don't deserve to be walking around talking about the truth. You don't deserve to be walking around talking about grace and humility and serving. None of it. And you keep putting yourself in this place, and it hurts us. But it seems like we're in an emperor wears no clothes situation, where no one's willing to tell these people that we know. Like, nobody's willing to say to them, like, you're wrong, the jig is up, like we know better. And so it feels like you have to take that for yourself and say, like, no, I am tired of them. Like, I'm sick of it. It's me. I want my life back without these people.
I think that in the United States of America, and probably most other places, it should be realized that people should have freedom to believe what they want religiously, as long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of others. I would argue that ultimately the Project 2025 people, they are using religion to get what they want. And these are not, ultimately, they're not religious people. It's just the guiding principle that they are using to unite people around their cause. People who typically will not investigate, will not question, will just follow right along, shake their heads yes. Meanwhile, they don't even realize that they're making life worse for themselves. They just say,
yeah.
Religion can do this again and again. And to those slaves who were saying amen, and those slaves, many who thought we must be the Hebrews from the Bible. That sounds like what we have been going through with the slave ships being brought all over the world, right? Especially to the West Indies and the United States and Central America and South America. It sounds like the plight of our people. We've been displaced from our various homelands. And so the song of the people of Moses is their song too. It's their story as well. And it's powerful.
And so that is kind of an issue I take with the tone of a lot of the celebration of religion. Is this was the tool of our oppression. And I think a lot of these people are religiously motivated, And so because religion is still good to them and to them still a good thing, they're very happy to like put a bow on it. Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, okay. The enslavers were motivated by Christianity. Okay, but we remixed it, we made it nice, and we made it our own, and now it's great, and we shall overcome. And it's like, no, for again, I don't think that's something you can decide for most people. But I think for most people who would be operating from autonomy, meaning not have been indoctrinated prior to, they would tell you the thing that was used to take away their freedom could never be their redemption. And how dare you want that? Like how dare you even suggest that? You would never even suggest that if it wasn't for the sort of mass delusion of racism and religion that we live under. It would be considered grossly inhumane, right? Imagine suggesting to Jews that that fucking Nazism was somehow gonna now be their salvation because they remixed it. Does that sound crazy to people? That's
what Pocket Locker. You don't have a newspaper or the internet, do you?
Maybe not.
Look at, and this isn't an indictment on all Jews, far from it. If you look at what the Israeli government is doing to the innocent people of Palestine, they've essentially just taken the Nazi playbook.
I agree.
They took the Nazi playbook and like, this is how we're going to get all of Israel back.
No, they're definitely doing it. They're now doing it to other people. No, that I agree with. I just meant in the sense of, you know, the very form that messed them up, that they were going to reclaim that for their own. They just wouldn't, like, they, you know, and I don't want to get too off track with the comparison, but just in general, like, it's insulting to me. Like, people should think about that. They should think about, can the Christianity that these people were enslaved under really be the thing that they need going forward? I just think that
okay. Let me as I often do, let me go to the scriptures. I'm going to go to Ezekiel 20. This is like the most useful verse in the Bible to an atheist like me. Like, I'll debate you. So let's see. Where's NRSV?
All right. So Randy said it helps people feel validated when their beliefs align with the bigger group. So this is what I think largely minority groups and people, oppressed people in general, like LGBTQ people, who are often the most faithful of the faithful. I think there's a lot of that going on. That's what I mean when I say auditioning for full citizenship. It's showing the major group, hey, I can play by the rules, I can fit in, I can be a good Christian. Okay, see me now as a good Christian, now make me whole. Because I'm a good Christian, it shouldn't matter that I'm gay. Because I'm a good Christian, it shouldn't matter that I'm black. Because I'm a good Christian, it shouldn't matter that I'm a woman. Because I'm a good Christian, on and on and on. And that's just not the case. That's just not how, you know, it's never worked like that, right? It might that's institutionally. It might work at an individual level. At an individual level, you'll have people who say, oh, you know, I used to say terrible things about gay people, but I have a gay coworker who's a great Christian man, and blah 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 blah. But we ain't got time for that nonsense. It will never work at an institutional level, because the very nature of the faith, again, it's like these two different things, right? The inclusive church, the super cool gay Christian, they all have to come up with a new interpretation, just like black people did, that upsets the apple cart. They have to come up with a new faith. No, there's really interpretation of the faith where being gay is just as valid as being straight. No, there's a new interpretation of the faith where women and men are equal. That is never going to be the same Christianity as the man is the head of the woman the way Christ is the head of the church, and for man to lie with man as he does a woman is an abomination. That's always going to be the official thing over here, and that's what they're talking about here with Black people. And that's what I mean when I say they're like different religions. I'm not trying to insult Black people, say you're not really Christians. I'm just trying to say the same way Black people think Catholics are crazy because they think the water and wine actually turn into the body and blood, and because they erect statues and they use prayer beads and they don't think all that shit is really Christian. Yeah, well, flip side, most white Christians don't think of this liberation theology that honors African religious customs and sees Black people as equal and holy. Yeah, that ain't really the Christianity that they have. So it's just like an opportunity to get real about that.
Well, I think what we see in the Bible when we're paying attention is you have to love the abuser. I think that's there. Let me give you an example. Many of you have heard me use Ezekiel 20 before. That's the scripture where God says he gave the Hebrews statutes they could not follow, even down to having them sacrifice their children. So because they had not, this is Ezekiel 24 to 26, because they had not executed my ordinances, but had rejected my statutes and profaned my Sabbaths, and their eyes were set on their ancestors' idols. Moreover, I gave them statutes that were not good, and ordinances by which they could not live. I generally break in at this point and say, how can we modern day people know which statutes and ordinances that he gave are not good? 613 commandments. Which ones are not good? How do we know? What's the tip off, right? For what's wrong with what he did to punish those ancient Hebrews. And today, people will stand up on the street corner holding up a sign at the Pride Parade saying, all this is wrong. Is it? How do we know?
How do we know? Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I'm of the impression almost that none of them are just or good. Like I don't think we need any of them. I think the idea that we even need, like I'm good. We don't need the 10 commandments. I definitely don't need the 613, but I don't even need the 10. And I definitely don't need the 2, the love God and love your neighbor. That's pretty much useless to me.
The law that prohibits you man stealing, right? You're not supposed to kidnap someone.
You know what?
Right?
I'll be honest.
That's a good law.
I just think like
they're not all bad.
I think man-made laws. I know this is going to sound absurd to religious people, but I think man-made laws are good enough.
We can do a much better job.
Or they're way better. They're not good enough in the sense that like they're as good as they can be, but they're good enough in the sense that for what we need to live together harmoniously, we have legal institutions and we can use those and improve those to get us, I think, much closer. But yeah, I don't think because even like a thou shalt not kill, that's not strictly speaking that useful because there's a lot of situations, right, where you can. So if you think about it, where our legal system sets up war has its own context. Maybe if you're in the military or the police or whatever, there's different rules around that. Okay, but then we treat murder differently than we treat mass murder, than we treat involuntary manslaughter, than we treat literally vehicular homicide because you were drunk or whatever, right? So we're able to like handle a lot of nuances in different situations, and that's, to me, that's far superior because there can be an exception for you needed to defend your family or whatever, right? Yeah, and thou shalt not steal, like that's okay, but you know what? I actually think the millionaire Wall Street banker who screwed over a lot of people deserves much worse punishment than somebody who literally was stealing to feed their family because, you know, they had no other means to do so. You know, I don't think that we want a world where those people are stealing, but I definitely think we want a world in which we treat them differently. And we have a world in which we treat them differently. We may not always execute it faithfully and properly, but we actually do have different laws for those situations, right? So it's like, yeah, I don't need God's law. God, y'all can save that. I don't need any of them, none of them. So is God giving the law? If he is, then we're probably good. We're probably good without it.
So the idea being, pocket locker, if you don't stick to the rules, God's going to punish you. We see this in the prophets where they're saying, if you do this, all these good things will happen. If you don't, this is the bad that will come on Israel, right, or on Judah, on whoever else is in the text. So it just depends. Again, it's a stick that's designed to beat. If literacy was low back then, it was a stick that was designed to beat people. And the greater that literacy rates grew, the better it worked, because people could do it to themselves. They could say it to themselves. You didn't need to wait for Saturday, right? For Friday night to roll around, for your Sabbath to start, for some rabbi to say this to you. You understood it because you had read it for yourself and you committed it to memory, or there was drilling in your mind to remember that.
Yeah. And if you were to go to like out in the woods with a bunch of people for, I don't know, an extended period of time, like you would quickly realize you probably need to set some parameters around things. And the best way to do it probably would just get together as a group and say, what can we agree on? You know,
what are we trying to achieve? What's
our
goal?
What are we trying to achieve? What's our goal? What works for everybody? All right, let's try to get through some more of this video here.
In the late 1700s, free black people in the North had already begun to develop their own denominations. In many cases, these denominations were in direct response to the racism black Americans experienced in their predominantly white congregations. But it wasn't until after the Civil War and the end of slavery that newly freed black people who were part of the Baptist churches and communities in the South were able to organize more formally. When the National Baptist
this is
Convention was founded,
something I want to mention here that's just important to think about this. That means most black denominations and black church traditions predate emancipation, right? So when we talk about like the black church really being different, it's literally it's from a time before when black people and white people could even go to the same churches. And I think that's important.
In 1895, it became the nation's largest African American denomination with almost 2 million members. So why is all of this important? Well, these new institutions became central spaces for black organizing and public discussion of issues like the abolition of slavery and then later the status of free black people. It gave them a means to mobilize against their oppression.
Control of religious life
Cheers, gang.
was always fraught under slavery, but it was sometimes the only arena in which people could exercise authority and control. Black preachers, black ministers, other kinds of black religious leaders have always been central figures in black communities.
During the Great Migration, millions of Southern black people moved to northern cities in search of better opportunities and to escape the Jim Crow South. It's estimated that between 1916 and 1970, more than 6 million black Americans left their homes in the South and relocated to northern cities. This influx of Southerners not only transformed northern black Protestant churches, but also created interactions that would offer black Americans a range of religious beliefs outside of Christianity. In our interview, Weisenfeld notes that out of the Great Migration came two major revivalist movements that identified Islam as the proper religion of black people, the Moorish Science Temple and the Nation of Islam. While Islam was one of the religions of African slaves,
in Newark, New Jersey, man, we have both. Man, we have Moors, we have Nation of Islam.
You have Hebrew Israelites,
Christians.
No doubt about it.
Oh yeah, we got Hebrew Israelites.
Mm-hmm.
We got Hebrew Israelites, no doubt. And then also probably, what's the other one?
ISUPK.
Yeah, but there's also like we have black. It's like one people associate with like, why can't I think of these fools now? It'll come to me. It'll come to me.
Kind of disappeared as a conscious faith and practice because slaves were forced to practice in secret. And it was through the work of Muslim missionaries, scholars, and activists that versions of Islam began to reemerge in black communities in the early 20th century, versions that reflected the fight against white supremacy and a search for independence. A lot of those immigrant preachers propagated the idea of universal brotherhood, an idea that appealed to many black Americans. Noble Drew Ali, who is considered the father of the first modern black Muslim movement, established the Moorish Science Temple in the early 1900s. The Moorish Science Temple rejected the idea of tolerating white supremacy through the black church and rejected the idea of black inferiority. The temple didn't reject Christianity, but it did see it as a European religion. Among the temple's central beliefs was the idea that black Americans were descendants of Moroccans and that their original faith was Islam. All
right, so that's another thing that's very interesting to me about all of these religions is that they all have some form of creationism, sort of in just sort of the origins of humanity. But then they also have some sort of weird history. We were on Maya's channel the other night talking about the Yaqub, Farrakhan believed that there were black scientists / gods that created white people. Like it's just crazy beliefs, right? But you find this in all of these religions that black people are really descended from this, and like they all have alternative history. So that's another problem with them, is that they all take literally a history that is not true, right? And that's weird because now we know the histories of all these groups. So it's just that's another thing that people just haven't quite realized, is that these religions come from times when the alternative truths were not known the way they are now. And so it's a problem because people can just look these things up. So
he rejected terms of the day like Negro, colored, and even black, believing that the term Moor was more accurate. The Moorish Science Temple had thousands of members in the 1920s across northern cities like Detroit and Philadelphia. And it's important to note that it was far from mainstream or orthodox Islam. Even the Quran used by the temple was written by Ali and derived from various sources. While the Moorish Science Temple was taking root, a man named Wallace Fard Muhammad established another non-orthodox black Islamic movement in 1930, one that you're probably familiar with, the Nation of Islam.
The world sees the problem in America as some gang-banging, dope-selling, crack using black people.
The nation's purpose was, according to Wallace Fard Muhammad, to use the faith to uplift black Americans and make them self-reliant. And it was under the leadership of Elijah Muhammad, who assumed leadership in 1934,
so can you pause it real quick?
The nation grew into a great political.
So if you're trying to reduce a people's self-esteem, make them more self-reliant, those are admirable goals. Right? We would hope anybody who professed to be a leader would take up that mantle. Yeah, I want to inspire people. I want to teach people to be self-reliant. I want to teach people to be united. I want to teach people to work together. I don't want to teach, I want to teach people not to be racist, not to do stupid things, blah, 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 blah. You could think of all these wonderful things, a whole host of wonderful things to teach people and leave hate completely off the list. So within this, right, within this reformation that these guys are seeking again and again, these groups of people getting together, there is something positive. There's a kernel of it, right? But they're rooting it in faith, a faith. And what are they doing? What we're going to see probably in this video is that they're honing it to fit the message they want people to have. Not necessarily an ancient message in its totality, but this is what we need right now, people. This is what we need to move forward here in the United States of America because it's a hostile environment to people of color. When this was happening, it was a hostile environment to Irish people, Italian people, Jewish people, and you can just go on and on and on. That list wasn't just black people. There are a lot of people on that list, you know. But keep it playing, Pocket Locker. Keep it playing.
Political force.
I represent to you not a prophet, yes sir, but I represent to you God in person. Yes sir!
It created one of the most influential black liberation figures of the 20th century.
We don't advocate violence, but our people have been the constant victims of brutality on the part of America's racists, and the government has found itself either unwilling or unable to do anything about it.
Malcolm X, a minister in the Nation of Islam, propagated a simple message: uplift black Americans' worth in their own eyes and make them independent. And the Nation of Islam was the foundation of his message, especially as it rejected Christianity and how it had been used by white supremacy. Religion, whether Islam or Christianity, was a big deal during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. Religious spaces like mosques and churches became mobilization centers.
And see, this is the problem too, it was in a sense they were onto something in recognizing that Christianity was an instrument of white supremacy, but the problem was their solution was to replace it with something equally untrue.
Another religion. Yeah.
Because churches and mosques were community centers and financially independent, they were also places where people were able to learn skills like public speaking, fundraising, and organizing meetings. And it's also why
And by the way, I think this is largely still how this breaks down in black communities, is that Muslims tend to see black Christians as cool, but like, y'all are really practicing the white man's religion. And then Islam feels foreign to black Christians, and it feels like you're not helping us audition for full citizenship, right? So it's almost like, I think Christians look at black Muslims as like, you're not helping, because don't you see how, unfortunately, like this country has so much Islamophobia, right? So like, yeah, I think there's a real tension between these things. It's very interesting. When it comes to certain things, people like to put them together. I'm sure if it comes to opposing atheism, they'll join forces and unite. But there's a lot of deep resentment in communities between black Christians and Muslims.
I was told by a Muslim I met that Islam is not a racist religion. Like, you don't, I think he was generalizing, maybe overgeneralizing. You don't have racism in Islam, because when you go to Mecca, you see people of all skin colors there, all backgrounds.
Yeah, but you could say
nations.
the same thing about New York City. That doesn't mean there's no racism. It just means
this is true. But the difference between New York City and what he's suggesting is, when they're on their Hajj and they're in Mecca, they've come there to be spiritually united and pray, right? God is the focus. So the boundaries of what is a visible skin color, if I can borrow a joke from Sarah Silverman, probably one of the funniest ones she ever told, why is this part white? There doesn't have to be any on-guardedness about what color somebody else is or what color you are yourself. That's not why you're there. I would argue that's true of the earth in general. That's not why we're here, right? I'm not here to be a black person. Next person is not here to be a white person. Next one's not here to be a Latino or Asian, and so on and so on. That's not why we're here. That's not why I evolved to this. That's not why my daughter is a completely different skin tone than me. There's lots of alleles that code for skin color in the gene. So she is who she is, and she'll probably be a little bit different in 3 months than she is now. Her eyes are already changing color. So there is that idea of, I guess, finding what is important about one's self and actualizing as much of that as possible. But rather than using a nice, very thick self-help book or even a thin one that's even better, they're using a religion. Well, a religion, as you and I know, Pocket Locker, it's a business. If you play it right, it's an endless stream of money that you have to earn so little of it. You know, you might work hard the first 3 years. After that, if it takes off and you got 10,000 members, you don't have to work so hard. You just got to think of something to say twice a week, you know, to those people.
Oh, absolutely.
Leaders of the civil rights movement were either ministers or active members in their churches and mosques. There were also efforts by the likes of ministers and theologians like James H. Cone to create a Black liberation theology. In a 2017 talk at the Yale Divinity School, Cone summarized the core of Black theology in this way.
Black power is not only alien to the gospel, it's not alien to the gospel, but rather it is the gospel of Jesus in 20th century America.
That just sounds insane to me. That just sounds insane to me. First off, you know, nothing about the Bible should be taken to be seen as Black power, because let's be clear about certain things. Like, to me, like, the Bible doesn't have the modern American racial context in it, right?
No.
But it is a racist ass book. It is telling these people of Israel, hey, you can go enslave from the people near you. Wait, matter of fact, I'm gonna need you to just go take their whole land and wipe all of them out. And it is definitely reinforcing differences that were seen to be ethnic, or what we would today consider racial. Maybe they weren't Black and white, but it was very much us and them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's crazy to even think that there's some sort of liberation theology in there, because there isn't. And then again, it is a total willful ignorance of even the modern Christian context and its history in America. The fact that white Christianity was used to enslave people, was used in segregation and Jim Crow, and the fact that now, even post-emancipation, the entire political history has been white Christians trying to alienate and disenfranchise Black people, based, you know, and they've all been evangelical fundamentalists. So again, you have to ignore that and pretend it isn't the problem so that it can be the solution. And that's why it won't work. That's why this is like, why it's never going to work. It's just never going to work.
Well, I in fairness to the quote unquote good Christians, which I think most Christians are absolutely wonderful people. They're the people who use their religion as a veneer. They're hiding behind it because they know, again, it's an organizing principle to get people to do what you want them to do, to make society into what you want it to be. And those Project 2025 people who essentially want Sharia law, but the Christian version, the Old Testament version here in the United States, they just want control. Why? Because they know if we have control, we essentially seize control of the monetary system. Well, then you control who that goes to. There's stuff I can't say. There's literally stuff because of where I have to travel. But if there's certain things, if there was no governor, like I didn't have to go back to certain places, I literally would say like another 5 minutes on this one topic, because it's so key to how certain governments are run. There is, or my uncle would get mad at me for saying there's an elegance to it. So there's a certain complexity that's built in there and is designed to benefit very few people, right? As far as percentages go, there's very few people, but it is clearly designed and built around them flourishing and putting forth minimal effort to do so. And that's done on the backs of millions of people.
Yeah, and it's not the individual Christians. It's the institution. And matter of fact, it's the individual Christians who are the representatives. So I think I don't know why, but this makes me think about Comcast. I hate Comcast. The name of my internet Wi-Fi is I hate Comcast.
You're not going to forget that one.
It's a terrible company. It's been voted like the worst company. But I learned something very interesting about Comcast, which is they treat their techs really well. They treat their techs really well. There's a decent job. It pays really well. They have good flexibility. And when you meet the techs from Comcast, guarantee you will meet nothing short of a lovely person. They always have they're always, they come right in the window. They're supposed to come in. They're always very pleasant. They'll respect your place and your stuff. They'll cover up their feet. They're how can we get there? They'll make sure you know how to use all your stuff before they leave. They're knowledgeable. They got all the tools. They're great. They're great. But you will hate your service. Don't get it wrong. Don't get it twisted now. You will hate your service, and there will be times it makes you want to literally bash your head through a wall. So what you have to do is, if you have an alternative, you got to sign up for the alternative. But what you can't do is get caught up in the friendliness of the representative, because they're always going to have a great representative. But no, I bring that up because that's Christians, right? Like, we're always meeting the great representative. Christianity, we think Christianity is suspect. It's great to them. Their benefit package is amazing. They're gonna live forever, my dude. And right, and
free
Jesus
healthcare, live forever.
And Jesus has saved them and forgiven them of all their sins, so they have no guilt about any of the bad things they've done in life. They don't feel any of their shortcomings because he has what they have, right? So we got to remember, like, we're not gonna like this thing, but it is going to feel really good for the representatives, and they are getting good benefits for it. It is a good job. They went looking for a good gig and they found a good gig.
They found it.
But the service still sucks, y'all.
There are inherent problems.
But no, I had to come to myself. So I hate Comcast as a customer. But what you're telling me is it's a good job as a tech. He's like, oh yeah, it's definitely a good job. I was like, I have to go think about that. Like,
you could do well. You could do quite well. Cable's always out somewhere. Internet's always out somewhere.
So we've talked about how religion has been for hundreds of years a central part of Black liberation and how Black communities have dealt with white supremacy. But what role does religion have to play today in the fight against systematic racism? Well, I asked Dawood Walid, a Muslim activist, if he thought there was a place for religion in activism today, and here's what he had to say.
The movement towards Black liberation in the United States of America has become less religious. If we look back at the 1950s and 1960s, it was the Black church, but also the mosque under the Nation of Islam that were the most potent organizing forces. When we look at what's going on right now, the Black church is seen as less of a means or a base for organizing.
According to Pew, while Black Americans are the most religiously inclined racial and ethnic group in the country, their church attendance has declined. The idea of religion as a central organizing force has also shifted. In fact, Black Americans under 30 are 3 times more likely to be religiously unaffiliated than Black Americans over 50.
That is awesome. That is awesome. That's not, and y'all, that's what I'm saying. That's no accident. That's no coincidence. That's a sharp decline. And between over 50 and under 30, that's fast. That's fast. I read this thing is over. It's over.
And some of this may have to do with tensions that may seem to exist between religious institutions and activism, especially on social positions on issues like LGBTQIA rights, women's representation, and reproductive rights.
And we can look at Black Lives Matter movement, for instance, which is a very left-orientated, much more secular organization or movement. And in fact, there are many within the religious community that actually are proponents of Black Lives Matter as a slogan, but don't agree with the tactics of the actual Black Lives Matter movement and the 501c3 nonprofit organization.
And even though there may be some tension, some religious groups are still involved in progressive social activism. Take, for example, Reverend William Barber's Moral Mondays movement.
Ain't no stopping us now. Say it again!
Moral Mondays is a campaign started in 2013 where church congregants have been leading protests every Monday in several state legislatures against policies negatively impacting everything from voting rights to the climate. And even if the future of religious institutions and Black activist movements is uncertain, Waleed is quick to point out what he sees as the central role religion has played throughout Black American history.
It is this religiosity and this connection to the church and to the mosque that I believe has granted us the spiritual strength and spiritual power to continue existing and struggling in these United States of America.
So what's so interesting to me about this,
hey guys, thanks for
is they have that whole discussion and there's no talk about the claims. And therefore there's no talk about whether or not it's true. It's just so, it's almost infuriating as a Black person. It's almost like, it's like they think we're cute. Like that's how I think it feels like sometimes. It feels like
they
people
think we're cute.
They think we're cute. They think like, oh, you know, because let's face it, Black people could be, should be, might be angry. We've got a lot to be upset about. There has been a lot in our past that has never really been reckoned with, and a lot in our present that people refuse to even talk about. But if we're off there, over there in our own little churches, clapping and singing along and loving our Jesus, and we're coming out all dressed up and we're all smiley to everybody and we got nothing to say but ma'am and sir in the world, thank you and praise the Lord. Oh, they just think that's so lovely and beautiful. It's so cute. Black people are so cute. But there's really no consideration of how insulting it really would be to us if you have to consider the possibility, even consider the possibility that in addition to enslaving us, in addition to segregation, in addition to continuing to marginalize us, in addition to continuing to discriminate against us, we have the fact that the legacy is they have had us build our community and identity around something where they took our traditional practices from us and gave us their own lies. And there's no consideration of the fact that what if these things are not true and what would that mean? Because to me, that's racial reckoning. That is, you got it.
You finish.
No, that is it. That's it. Just that,
okay.
That we need to deal with that.
A couple of my brothers have run their DNA. There appears to be a lot of Nigerian ancestry. I'm pretty sure it's on my mom's side. I'm not sure. Obviously, I don't have my father's test to know. But there are traditions that probably Nigerian ancestors I had that I'm out of touch with. I have a Nigerian neighbor. I can go ask him, what might some of those things be? But let's say prearranged marriage is one of those. I'm just guessing. It's just an example. I don't want that. My neighbor's granddaughter just had her baby a month before we had ours. And my wife, that lady's mom, and her grandmother were teasing, oh, this is her boyfriend, this is her boyfriend. And I was getting visibly upset about this because I definitely want my daughter to be able to make her own choices. And I want them to be good ones. So this is a newborn. These are two newborns, not 2 months old between both of them. And I'm upset, you know. There are going to be traditions, regardless of culture, I would imagine, you know, be you Nordic, Germanic, or Icelandic, that you're not real happy that your ancestors kind of threw themselves into. You're going to want to break from some of those traditions. There might be other ones where you think, oh my gosh, how lovely is that? That's kind of beautiful, and maybe more people should embrace that today. Sure, it's a mixed bag, but I don't have an issue by not having prearranged marriages. I don't. Might have been great, might be great for those who are subject to it, but it's not a box I would check that I want.
Yeah, there will always be a hindrance and not a source of progress. I'm with you, Tsunami. Sumami, listen to me. The thing is, like, all right. So I was trying to think about how to put this. I feel like it's okay. I feel like there can't be a reckoning of the lies that were told to Black people in the name of Jesus, because let's face it, like, there isn't a larger conversation amongst white people about lying about Jesus. So there's and it's time for this conversation, and it's time for this conversation because of the internet. It's time for this conversation because of apologetics. It's time for this conversation because Christians are still running around talking about they got the truth on their side. It's time for this conversation because of science, because of the pandemic. We could keep naming reasons. Trump. Okay, it's time for us to have this conversation. Okay, and the problem is, the way I see it is, like I said, when you look at the history, you have slavery, you have segregation, now you have disenfranchisement, mass incarceration, that list goes on and on. But part of what you have to say to me is, black people in this country still have next to nothing. When we talk about economic disparities, again, y'all, we talking about 10 times differences. We talking about the average white household being worth like 130,000, and the average Black household being worth like 13,000. These are not made up numbers. So the problem is, when you have next to nothing, and then you've built your community, your solidarity, your hope, meaning, and purpose on a lie, that has to be dealt with. You lied to us, and that is just so hurtful, because it's like we can't really even construct our own future. We don't even have our own autonomy, because we're still going to the religious leader every time something goes wrong. We're still on our knees in prayer every time something happens. We still got our loved ones and elders sending their money to televangelists when they get sick.
Copeland.
You know, and dealing with all of this, and it's like nobody's ever gonna take seriously the cost of all of that, because they think it's cute, right? They're so busy. Oh, look at them in their church worshiping Jesus. Oh, that's beautiful. No, like think about how seriously our people take this, think about the consequences of them taking it that seriously, recognize that was thrust upon us as part of slavery, was not something we freely chose ourselves. Now you need to get your own house in order. I don't care if you don't want to give up your sweet, sweet, precious lies about Jesus. Too bad. Like it's been you've made too much of a mess of the rest of the world over this nonsense. And you can't ever fully reconcile with the deep, deep racism of all of it until you do that. So like this is why I'm trying to articulate why it hits different. Like what feels super fucked up as a Black person, for instance, having to watch Philosophy Bros, like having to sit around and watch white guys have these philosophical back and forths with no sense of care in the world about the real consequences in other cultures and communities if this stuff happens to not be true, because they just don't think about how it hits in different communities. That's why I wanted to do this. To show this is part of when I say religion hits differently in Black communities. This is what I'm talking about. Because look, if you have, on average, I'm not saying everybody's wealthy and everybody's got resources, but if on average your community has resources, then you could play a little bit. You know, if you wanna play prayer games and start up prayer lines and worship services and all this little stuff you could do, that's fine, because you're gonna have the best health care. You're going to have the best hospitals. You're going to have the best diets and the best job opportunities and the best schools. So you're going to feel blessed. You know, that's the other thing about being white. It's hard not to feel blessed when you have the best of everything. So
not all white people do.
Not all white people do, but I'm just saying that's I think that's definitely part of it. But yeah, it's just saying that, like, now think about people who have next to nothing, but then what little they have, they're investing in the wrong place or spending wastefully. Like there's no give for that. There's no extra money for that. There's no, oh, she's rich. Who cares if she throws $10,000 at a minister? No, that was her life savings she just gave to that minister. Like, no, that was it. All of it. There's no more. It's gone. There's no more. It's gone. Oh, what? No, she doesn't have a rich son. There's no such thing. No, she doesn't. No,
right. She's not bouncing back from that.
Yeah, she's not bouncing back from that. There's nobody to just help her fix that. Like that's just a devastating, life-altering decision that person made. Right. And that's what I mean. That's when you start to realize, when those type of consequences, you start to say, okay, we gotta stop playing. Like there comes a time we just say, all right, let's just stop playing with this, because this is just out of control. And there's no need for it anymore. There's no need for it anymore. I think, and again, I think this is the real hard part. We're in a real, and it's why I think it's part of the divisiveness. We're in a real moment. I think, like, if you think about what comes out of the right in a lot of different religious circles, it's a very serious motivation. I've been in rooms with people recently in the last week or so, and people just start talking about the devil and what the devil can do, what the devil's going to do. And people just talking about the devil, and I'm just like, okay. And then I think for people that don't believe, like, we know this stuff isn't true. The earth is billions of years old. We evolved. There's no supernatural. To grow up, stop playing.
Satan's not here.
Satan's not here. Satan's not here. Exactly.
Yeah, Satan's not here.
Satan's not here. So it's pretty difficult, I think, to make those two worlds mesh. But somehow we're doing it. I guess we deserve a little bit more credit than we give ourselves.
Well, I think it's just that way. Those two worlds happen to overlap. And there's I've been listening to there's a Deconstruction Zone channel on YouTube. I don't know what they're called on TikTok, but the guy, I think he began on TikTok. and there's another guy, Ian. I don't know, but I think they know each other. They sort of take on theists. God is imaginary. Change my mind. That sort of thing. And it's fascinating to hear these two guys go at it because there's like no mercy when people are coming at them from the Ian guy. He just is. I think he has like a zero tolerance policy that anybody can put forth a halfway decent argument for Christianity. It just seems that way to me so far. I haven't listened to a lot of his stuff, just about 6 hours of it. And then the other guy, he was a former believer. He went to seminary. He went to Bible college, and he gently, sometimes, usually, takes the arguments that people present to him, shows them why they aren't necessarily great arguments. Well, now if you're that guy, not the first guy, if you're that guy, you're sending people back to their environment with that argument that they thought was good, debunked. You now send that person, it's like these baits I have for these little ants I get in my house. So the idea is that the ant will walk into the trap, take the bait, and carry it back to their, take it back to their, whatever, hive, cluster, community, ant community, whatever. So they take it back, and now it starts to poison all the people there. So you can look at it two ways. Either they've come to us with the poison, we didn't take the bait, and now they've gone back to realize, hey guys, instead of the bait I took, I'm coming back with this. Let's try this. And if it's disseminated, right, it starts debunking that commonly shared belief. This is a useful tool Democrats, my fellow Democrats, should embrace. You have to debunk the lies. You can't just say no. You have to say why the lies are, truthful.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a really great way. So when someone brings up something supernatural to me, I often jump right on it. Like, yeah, let's deal with this immediately, rather than letting them say that nonsense around me. Right? I don't want people who believe in those things which make them delicate, as far as demons, right? Ghosts. I head right for that belief because I want that person to understand that, look, you're talking to me and I think that's false. So I'm willing to sit here with you and test the truth claim that you're offering, saying that what you believe is valid when I think what you believe is not valid. I get that you love it. I get that you appreciate things about your faith. And there are things I admire and appreciate about your faith. But this ghost business isn't part of it. This Jesus coming back isn't part of it. This almighty God isn't part of it. I like the church barbecue idea. That's fantastic. You're cooking pork. You're cooking pork there, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, seriously. So Randy said the country has never attempted to acknowledge what happened, not to mention tried to make it better, not even something symbolic like a holiday marker, end of slavery, sweep it under the rug. Yeah, so I guess Juneteenth is our first attempt to try to do that.
Yeah, it's as close as we get.
My thing is, I think there's something deep going on here, which is, I think a big part of this is if Black people go full, I forget what's it called when you think like your captors, when you take up your captors mentality. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
You put yourself in their shoes. I don't know what the technical term for that would be.
Yeah, there's a term. I'm not thinking of it. Thinking like your captors. What's that called? Stockholm syndrome. There you go. So
I was sympathizing with them.
Stockholm syndrome. So I think there is a lot of Stockholm syndrome going on here. And that's what that is. That's like you're abuse victim and you start to to think like and sympathize with your abuser. But I think the function that it has is deep, and people don't think about it. So what it does is it basically says to, and this is weird because let's be honest about this. Conversation's only happening with the living, right? So in a way, we're always wrestling as the living population with how do we reconcile with our past. And for what should be obvious reasons, I think people who white Americans who still are largely who largely are the only people who are fully enfranchised to varying degrees, and do sometimes carry that for whatever reason they're like they identify as they're like the colonizers and marginalized people. We stand in for the oppressed and whatever, and we try to figure this out. And if those of us that are Black, if we're willing to say, hey man, that stuff in the past, that was some really rough stuff, but we're good Christians now. Okay? We're good Christians now. And we're here, and now we're gonna participate in this thing together. That it's like it lets them off the hook. It's like we're providing the permissive structure. We're in a sense saying, well, hey man, now we get to be, hey, we're in this America. And that's where the narrative comes out, right? And it's really sick because when you hear people talk about it, as a lot of times as Black Christians, this is where a lot of Black Christians have to go. And it's like super off-putting when you hear them talk about it. And it's very much reminds me of like an abused woman who, when she's sort of reharmonizing with the partner, sort of, hey, I'm sorry about that, baby, whatever, and they're cuddling and they're trying to get it back together. She starts to, well, I was really acting up. I was really tripping.
She's justifying the abuse she received.
Justifying the abuse she received, right? And in a way, even though she's not saying it, but there's in a way that's saying, yeah, and I guess that left you no other choice but to go upside my head, right?
Right.
And so I feel like we participate in that when we like, and I try to think of it as, no, you owe me full citizenship and participation in the American experiment because this is my home. And this is my home because I was born here. So, by hook or by crook, I just happen to be an American citizen like everybody else. And I think that, boom, that's where I get full participation now. Now, when it comes to, reconciling the past, it's like, no, we gotta deal with that, because I'm not going to tell you, oh, I believe in Jesus now, so it's all good. I'm going to tell you, people that look like me are severely disadvantaged in this country, and y'all have never done what it takes to make it right. And that needs to be dealt with, right? And that's the alternative. That's what happens, I think. That's what's at stake, I think, for Black people. It's like, I think when Black people deconvert, you stop letting oppressors off the hook for oppressing your ancestors. Like that's not why you do it, but it comes with it. It's like, you're like,
you're right. You can't let other people make excuses. Something I've seen in the last few years, like I've never seen it before, is a living white person getting flack for slavery. Slavery within the United States. Now, this might be someone who's 40, 50 years old. It's abundantly clear they played no part. And yet they need to feel guilty. They need to apologize. I don't understand that. I've had to tell several people, like, this was not your fault. You and I were not alive at that time, nor were our parents. And for many people in this country, they had a grandparent, or maybe two, or maybe four, that didn't even live here in the United States during that time, right? They weren't citizens. They hadn't immigrated here. So they played zero part at all. But it's become fashionable for them to feel bad, as if they played a part. I think compassion is a necessary thing. We can all look back at that long period of history, American history, and say, you know what? We clearly weren't at our best as a nation. There was some wrong-headed thinking going on here. Find me somebody who comes from a culture where they can't say the exact same thing about the people they come from, whether they're in Yemen, Tallahassee, Florida, Russia, Outer Mongolia, or Zanzibar. Yeah, man, there's been some boneheaded stuff that happened here too. So the idea, well, let me just finish. The idea is working on the present. Let's make now as best as we can make it. And let's enable the people of the future to have an easier time with the progress that they are responsible for. There's progress we are responsible for. Let's get to work, right? We've come a long way, but we all can see there's still a ways to go. Let's work on that. There's not a lot we can do about the past. There just isn't. But if we're squandering our present day and our future trying to fix that, right? Like go back in time, like Marty McFly, trying to fix something, we're not going to be successful. Go ahead, Pakman.
So yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it depends. Like for me, I think people. I've definitely encountered people who feel guilt that I don't necessarily think they should feel guilt for, but I've also encountered people who I think are benefiting. I think people are benefiting from it, whether you were here or not, whether you own slaves or not, whether you're rich or not. There's a difference between wealth and white privilege. They're highly correlated, especially on the wealth side. But wealth is not the full encompassment of it. And so I just think, it's not really useful to me or anybody else. But like, I think, for instance, if you're supportive of, at least what I think would bring us closer to equity, and for me that includes things like reparations, then I don't think you have anything to be guilty about. I just think you should be aware of the fact that you benefit from this, and then trying to spend your privilege and make things more equitable. I think you're good to go. I think the problem is the people who deny their privilege and then also deny like the origin of it, right? That I think that's, and then I think I think sometimes they get pushed back, and then they feel guilty. And then in those situations, I just think you need to just kind of like sit with it for a little bit, because it's a reality, so because we live in a world where at the same time people are denying the realities of privilege and economic disparities and racial realities and things like that. It's really tough. People are telling us critical race theory is racism and stuff like that. But yeah, no, you know, it's so that's my thing. I just think people, you know, I think people should support the policies that we need, and that's what matters. And you know, I don't really, you know, them feeling bad about it isn't really going to help anybody.
Exactly. Look, nobody feeling bad about it is going to help anybody. The key lesson that is to be gained from those types of oppression is they don't help. They'll make some people wealthy, but as far as humanity goes, they don't prosper humanity. They benefit very few. And maybe those who come wealthy off the backs of enslaving others would have been better off had they not done so. We can look at the various times in US history where there have been groups of white men that have gotten together to like bomb the Black Wall Street and other events like that. People who've gotten together like the Klan and kill Black farmers or burn down their crops, blah, 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 blah. If they had just looked at it holistically and said, you know, that guy's doing pretty well. And he's now he's doing so well, he's hiring white people and he's paying them a fair wage. I'd like one of my kids to have a job like that. So rather than knock the guy down, if you just said, I'm not going to stand in his way, I'm not going to be in the way of his prosperity, and allow that to flourish, then the whole community's economy would be better, right? You'd have more people thriving.
But they did.
Why wasn't I'm just saying, again, the point, the realization should have said, we're working against ourselves.
But they're still,
when we heard them, we heard us.
It's still that way now. Like they still don't want us to vote. They don't want
racism.
Us to, yeah,
racism is a very stupid thing. It was an idea. I don't think it was ever designed. I think it was just a stupid idea that just kept gaining the wind behind it, pushing it along. You know, because yes, you can make a buck off this segment of society by persecuting them, blah, 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 blah. But now when their neighborhoods, their communities develop something you might want to enjoy or your children's children will, they're scared to go over there because they're perceived as the enemy now. Well, how good of a job did you do? Really? That person didn't do a good job. They made things worse. So I think that is the wrong head. Is gangs do the same thing, right? They're trying to make money for themselves. They're trying to better their own lives, and in the process, they make life worse for the people they surround. They make life worse for themselves because now somebody's looking for them. Somebody's out to kill that person because they decided to make money in a rather illegal way, and there's competition for that too. Again, it's wrong-headedness. I'm trying to achieve a goal.
Well, to me,
is there a destructive way to achieve? Is there a non-destructive way to achieve the exact same goal?
Reparations.
There most likely is.
I think a lot of the issue for me is like, I don't know, the way our system is set up. Like, I would get rid of inheritance if it was up to me, because I think the problem I have,
taxes, you mean, or
no, what do you inheritance. Mean you get? Inheritance. I don't think you need to leave money to future generations. Like, I think that's weird. I think you should just make money. Whatever you die with goes back to like a public pool or whatever. Because the problem I think we have is that nobody ever takes reparations seriously. But in the meanwhile, the people who benefited from the oppression continue to do so, generation after generation after generation, and it goes unimpeded. It just goes on forever. And so it's like you're never gonna make any effort to bring these people up, but you're gonna let the people who benefited from it just keep doing it. So that's why I'm like, just get rid of inheritance. Now it's fine. Now you don't have to do reparations. Everybody just starts over again. And then if you think the economy is so good, if capitalism is so sweet, if everything's supposed to be so wonderful, then let your kid have that. And it's so weird to me because as soon as you suggest this, all people with resources like seize up and they freeze. It's like, why? And then what is it? And if you really ask them, it's like, that means I'm not going to be able to give my kid an advantage. That means I'm not going to be able to leave my kid a house. I'm not going to, but you don't think that other kid needs all that. You think that kid, you think the kid goes, you think he's fine, right? He's fine. Just let him go to the public school. The public school should be fine. Right? Just let him get a job. That's what I said. Kids should go to school and work hard and get a job. Your kid could do that. Your kid could go to school and work hard and get a job and buy themselves a house and save for retirement. And just everybody just does that. I think if we actually did that, and I'm kind of being serious, if you could do that, I think that would be the way without reparations to get us towards the type of actual economic system that we need. Because now all of a sudden, everybody would realize every generation is a hard reset. And really quickly, you would get the type of social policies that you need if everybody was really just playing the genetic lottery every generation. Because you need that. Because the way we have it right now, the rich people, like, they're hoarding resources and they have no incentive to establish a system where they can't just hoard resources and continue to pass their hoarded resources down to their kids. And at the same time, they don't want to do nothing to help nobody else. So I just think that they have us in sort of inertia, like a great stalemate where like nothing really gets better.
I guess I've had a very unusual life where I've met a lot of wealthy people in my life, and I've rarely met one that wasn't willing to be helpful. And I mean, willing to be helpful to the point where they show up. Like, you're doing that? Can I help? I want to be a part of it. So, but that's Fort Wayne. That's not everywhere. That's Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I see it here in California too, where Fort Wayne, when I was growing up there, it clearly was a community. You know, we had floods that would take people out of their homes. So you would see thousands of people show up to sandbag. The richest and the poorest were all there together. And yet, on the poor part of town, you weren't flooded. You didn't flood. You weren't near the river. But this was your community, so you came. They let kids out of school to go fill sandbags. I grew up in a housing project. Me and my friends and my brothers, we'd walk down there or take the bus over there, and we'd just fill sandbags all day. We'd get that orange McDonald's juice that's so good, and I forget what the food was, but it wasn't much, probably not much more than a turkey sandwich with a piece of cheese on it, you know, but that was our community. We felt that it was the right thing to do, not just because they let us out of school. That's just somebody's good idea. But we're filling sandbags that would go in places that we like to go in the summers for ourselves. You know, we like to hang out at this store or this place or that place. Well, it's still going to be there because we're working to preserve it. Rich and poor did that. I've heard where you've been, but it sounds like you've definitely had a completely different experience from me. If you could suggest, and you might not be able to do it now, a culture where they have that reset, I'd be interested to read a little bit about it. I don't, at this point, I don't agree with it, but it is a new idea that you're presenting that I've never heard before, that there should be that kind of reset. Having a newborn, I know I want to give her every possible advantage I can, right? She's got a dad that has a bad heart, diabetes, and arthritis. So I don't know how many years I can devote to her, but I'm going to do my level best. And if my brother Rick wants to leave her a few $1 million, I'm okay with it. You know, he's got the extra. If he wants to do that, he can do it. I'm all for it.
Oh yeah, of course. Nobody minds being left a lot of money.
No, but again, typically the people I've known that have had way more money, and I mean way more money than they need, they're almost always generous. Because I think they're almost always older too. They're almost always in their 60s and 70s when I met them. They realize they have more years behind them than they do ahead of them.
I just think that we
there's
can't
no real
rely on
legacy.
that. Like I've known some really generous
Well,
rich
you
people
probably
too,
can't.
but that's they're not.
Trump's not giving you anything.
We know there's not enough of them, right?
Yeah, Trump's not going to leave you anything. Mark Cuban, generous guy, he's not going to leave you anything.
Something funny, like when I date women, a lot of times it's really funny that like they're surprised because I don't make a lot of money, right? But I'm not selfish, and then I'll hear like stories of like dudes that they dated in the past, like rich, like really wealthy dudes. And almost invariably they're like, oh, he was such a he was so cheap. Like, oh my goodness, he wouldn't spend money on anything. Like it was crazy. And so they're like, I'm easier to deal with than like a rich dude. Cause sometimes these rich guys, they're rich as shit, but they even like when they date, they're cheap as fuck. It's just crazy. It's just like,
we can go into that one day if you want to, but briefly, let me tell you what it often is. What it often is a guy will have a goal to get to $1 million, and he reaches that goal. So now the next goal, he immediately sets another goal. Well, I got to get to 10 million. And all this being generous, all this enjoying that success goes right out the window. And it becomes about reaching that next goal. And so many of them will trample on the people they love to get there. It doesn't matter. I've seen it in my own family. I had an uncle who died, and we had a family phone call. And I'm looking at all my cousins and other family members, and we're trying to raise money for my uncle's funeral. And his daughter asks, well, who would like to donate? And it's just silence. And I'm looking at them going, okay, you're millionaires, you're millionaires, you're millionaires, you're millionaires. And none of you, like my aunt is broke, this aunt is broke, this aunt's on disability, blah, blah, blah. None of you want to donate anything. And I said, how much is it going to cost? She threw out a number. It's like $3,500 or something like that. I says, I'll donate $500. Figuring if everybody just matched what I gave, that I knew could, right? They could do it more easier than I could. Everything would be paid. Well, then there was my brother, Henry. He had to jump in there. All right, I'll match that. And then it was back to silence because they were almost 1/3 there without anybody else giving up anything. My aunt on disability, I'll give $200. Okay, the others still don't have to give up anything yet. And it was just effing sad. Effing sad. These are people who pay cash for things.
Yeah, no, it's just, look.
They don't need credit cards. Those are you guys.
I'm just saying it's weird. It's just a weird thing. And look, to be clear, look, I'm not trying to take anybody's inheritance. I'm like Sumami. If I don't get my mother's house, I probably won't own a home either. What it is that I've often heard, like, I don't know, like it's weird to me that people don't support reparations almost universally. It's also weird to me that people don't meaningfully support what I consider to be economic justice, which is a variety of policies. I'm open to any and almost all of them that are aimed at addressing wealth inequality. They're aimed at saying we know there are certain groups that are largely disadvantaged economically through no fault of their own, and there are sensible things we can do to help them out. And I think if you're going to keep the system the way it is, then you do those things because you acknowledge a number of motivations. First off, you got to do something with Native Americans. Y'all, we took the country from these people,
the whole thing,
and murdered them in mass in the process. And what's left of them, we reserved to reservations and we exploited them. So like, yeah, we owe them some shit. Like, there's just no way around that. Then most of the labor force of the next however many years was slave labor. And so the descendants of the plantation owner is still economically advantaged, but the descendants of the plantation workers is not. That's a problem. You can't keep putting the names of plantation owners on shit.
Let me ask you something. Because I've been presented with this. I've been presented with this reparations question before. Like, what do I think is appropriate? I would say I personally, at 52 years old, am far enough removed that I don't get anything. My neighbor, who's 89, I think she survived the civil rights era where Black people were being pulled out of their cars and hung in trees. Maybe we owe her something.
I don't think it's about age.
Let me just say, I think probably the greatest reparation we can give to someone who's not her, let's say someone who's younger, right, than her, is an education. Now, the Native American problem, I haven't put any thought into that, so I don't have an immediate solution for them. I could sit down and work on one with them, but I would say if you wanted to go to a 4-year college or trade school, it's covered. What that does is it teaches somebody a skill that they can then, when they're ready, if they want to, start their own business, or they have the training to become a doctor, an attorney, and so on. You know, obviously for a doctor and attorney, you need continuing education. But if you want to be a lot of different careers, you fit in there with your 4-year degree. We'll cover that because that improves everybody. Just handing somebody a stack of cash or, you know, wiring it into their account. Great, I got $2 million. So I immediately know that Mercedes is going to do well. BMW is going to do well. General Motors is going to do well. What are the balloons for?
I don't know. It's just some AI thing.
AI is going to do well. You know, so there are companies that will do well as a result of that influx of money into the economy. I think it's short-lived. I think a lot of people who haven't been educated on how to take care of that kind of money are going to squander it. And they'll be in no better a situation than they were before they had the money.
So I think I think it's not about age, because if it is, then you just wait out the people who who are eligible, and then we go, oh, it's too late. We would have done reparations, but they're all gone.
Some people might have that exact idea. Like, there's nobody around anymore. Can't help them out anymore.
Yeah, no, I think it's about groups. I think it's about certain groups that are clearly economically disadvantaged. And again, why is nobody concerned on the flip side? I think that's a very interesting test of motivation. Like, why is it so, it seems so difficult for people to wrap their heads around the idea of giving people who are the descendants of enslaved people resources, but nobody bats an eyelash at the fact that the plantation owners' kids are still benefiting from it. Nobody ever says, well, he's too young. He okay, so maybe the grandson who maybe worked the plantation a little bit as a youngster, maybe he can still benefit from it. But this person is 7 generations removed. Why are they still inheriting millions of dollars? But we don't work that way. We're totally fine with that. So that's my thing. It's just make it make sense, make it fair, make it equitable. That's why I said if you just cut off everybody's inheritance, then we're good. That's fair. Nobody. I know it's harsh. I know people don't like that, but it is fair, right? It doesn't. You may not like it, but it's fair.
Yeah,
but so the other thing is to
it's
say, if you're
interesting.
gonna
Like I
let these,
say, I
if you're
don't
gonna
know.
let if you're gonna let these other people continue to benefit from work they didn't do, then I think you're always going to find yourself in a situation where, yeah, the people who they stole that land from, yeah, they want something too. The people who worked that land, yeah, they want something too. Because again, those people were all disadvantaged by it, and they're continuing to inherit that disadvantage. So all we're saying is at least break them off a little something. That way we're at least doing something to mitigate their disadvantage if we're going to continue to propagate the advantage the other way. Otherwise, we see the problem. We know there's a problem. We're going to let the slave owners' kids continue to benefit. We tell everybody else too bad. And that's the system we have now. And to be honest, it kind of sucks. So I'm just saying we got to do something different. Now, as far as what the actual policies are, this is really interesting, but my own sort of progression in my thinking right now is there has to be autonomy, because I feel like it's paternalistic of us to sit here and say it should be this or it should be that. Because one of the things that economic parity comes with is options. So for people with resources, they had options. If you had a kid that was really smart, you could send that kid to school, and they could become a doctor and do their thing, but if you had another kid that was industrious, you could give them money and they could start a business, or they could take over the family business or whatever. But you might have a kid who really didn't have it together, and they just dicked off, and they just cost you a lot of money, but hey, that was pretty much the best they were going to do. But but then for us to sit here and say, well, for these people, it's going to be a 2-year college, or for the, I think that's why I say I'm kind of in favor. I'm really more in favor, and that's why I don't necessarily talk about reparations. I'm just cool with reparations, and I know we got people like Maya and Cam in the community that love to talk about reparations, so I try to show them some love. I'm definitely with it. I like to talk about economic justice, and I think reparations are potentially like a big part of that. But I think that's why I say any and all, because I do think certain things like making education more affordable, or providing, about like free education in one form or another for certain groups, I think that is a huge thing I would do. I think that's a big thing, right? But I do think some people just want money, and I think
that's true. Some people just want money.
And I do think, some people squander money just like some people squander their inheritance, but it's not for us to tell them they can't have it because they might squander it. I think it's up for us to say, hey, if we're going to really give it to them and we don't want them to squander it, then what other resources do we need to provide them, like training, banking, and resources, so that they don't squander it, if that's really the concern? Or you just give it to them and say, hey, they're grown people, and if they squander it, they squander it. But I don't think we can not give it to them because they might squander it. It's and that's a different, like, some people are like, some people, like, if you ask them about like giving money, for instance, to unhoused people, some people will say like, oh, I'll just give them money. Other people say don't do that because they might, buy this or that, and they might buy drugs, or so buy them a sandwich, because then they won't squander it on drugs. But maybe they don't need a sandwich and they need a t-shirt. So maybe giving them $10 does help them, and you just got to trust them to sort their priorities. Yeah, but it's tough, and I hate to tell people, but hey, if you're not totally like on an anti-drug craze, sometimes that's what a person really needs right now.
All right, I gotta go.
That's a different thing. This is fun.
I gotta go. But can I give the closing? Can I close with a personal story?
Sure.
All right, this is to honor what Pocket Locker just said. 1,000 years ago, I went to see this show at Feidodo. These rap artists were amazing. Feidodo is a restaurant that was in Los Angeles, like the Adams district of Los Angeles. I come out, with my food. I barely ate anything because I was enjoying the show so much. I typically rode around in that Honda Element I had with a gallon of water, in case there was an emergency or whatever, or I just drink it, So I had an unopened gallon of water. I had this expensive food, which I barely touched, utensils, all that stuff. I got in my SUV. I fired up. I'm getting ready to leave. Tap, 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 tap on my window. I roll the window down. Well, I didn't have a crank. I roll the window down. I said, "Yes, may I help you?" There's a person that, excuse me, sir. I'm real hungry. I'm wondering if you can help me out, so that I can get a meal. Typical me. You know what? I just had a delicious part of a delicious meal in Fedoto. I have it right here. I'm going to go ahead and give this to you. This has utensils in it, and there's mashed potatoes in there, and this blah 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 blah. Go ahead and here. This you can have this. This person, I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. This is kind of a person who kind of let themselves go a lot. Not the direction I went in. They let themselves go in the other direction, and they said, well, you know what I really could use? I really could use some water. Could you give me a little something so I can get some water? I'm like, flipped up my console. I have here an unopened gallon of water. So you can have this too. And they reached in and they took it. Thank you. Look, could you just give me $5? Because I want me some correct. And they started doing this little.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Now, here's the worst part. I laughed so damn hard that I reached in my wallet. I gave that person $20, let them keep the food and the water, and wish them well.
That's the way to do it sometimes.
Well, please, so correct.
But you know what though? That was the probably the most compassionate part of that for you, right? Because it was easy to give the water, it was easy to give the food, and then you realized this, and then you had to say, "This isn't about me right now," and still give it to them, right?
I don't care what audience you stand me in front of. That story's a hit.
It's a hit. It was great.
I know I can make 40,000 people laugh if I ever need to. But there's something else, because I happen to know that people steal for crack, and they sell their bodies so they can get crack. And if I've made it so this person didn't have to do that, right? Maybe that's demoralizing to them to steal, but they'll do it anyway.
Right.
It's demoralizing to sell their body, but they'll do it anyway. This cost me basically nothing, right? It cost me nothing to give to this person this one time. I'll probably never see that person again. For all I know, they took that $20, bought a lotto ticket, and now they're, rich because they freaking got their ducks in a row. I don't know. But I know this, I had a chance to do good, and it was fun. That person made it fun for me to do good. I had no problem. Now, if I saw that person again today, I would hope they weren't in the same situation. Right? I would hope they improved their situation. Obviously, I can never know. But that's my story. Take care of yourselves.
All right, folks, and each other.